Trilateral Global Summit Strengthening Global Economy. Trade for Peace. Trade for Peace. Global scene, World Bank, WTO measures during COVID-19, trade for peace, global trade, reforms to strengthen global economy, multilateral trading systems, WTO during COVID-19, free trade. All are important. Global economy, we all know how it is moving. The world economy is experiencing exceptionally strong but highly uneven recovery. Global growth is set to reach 5.6%. Post-recession underpinned by steady but unequal vaccine access. Growth is concentrated in few major economies, with most emerging market and developing economies lagging behind. While about 90% of advanced economies are expected to regain pre-pandemic per capita income level by 2022, only about 1/3 of the emerging market developing economies are expected to do so. Only 1/3. That's not a great sign. In low-income countries, the effects of pandemics are reversing earlier gains in poverty reduction and compounding food insecurity, other long-standing challenges, sustainable development goals which we have set in. They're all reversing a bit, unfortunately. The global outlook remains highly uncertain, with major risk around the path of the pandemic and the possibility of financial stress amid large debt loads. Controlling the pandemic at a global level will require more equitable vaccine distribution, especially for low-income countries. For low-income countries, we need equitable vaccine distribution. In addition to the necessary efforts to pursue widespread vaccination, policymakers face a difficult balancing act as they seek to nurture the recovery through efficiently allocated fiscal support while safeguarding the price stability and fiscal sustainability. Very important to understand this. See, widespread vaccination is required. We have to recognize a difficult balancing act when it comes to vaccination. Recovery through efficiently allocated fiscal support. When it comes to fiscal and monetary side, if you look at fiscal allocation is crucial. Price stability, inflation, we should not overshoot. And fiscal sustainability, you need financial stability. Fiscal sustainability, you don't want to overshoot. A huge fiscal deficit, again, inflation will be mounting for years to come. So fixing the deficit, it will be a major issue. Policymakers can also reach lasting recovery by undertaking growth enhancing reforms. Very important is reforms, steering their economies onto a green, resilient, inclusive. Most important thing is inclusive growth, financial inclusion we talked about as a sustainable value creation. So green mechanism is must. A green, resilient, inclusive development growth. The economic activity is firming across major advanced economies, most notably in the United States, where the recovery is being powered by substantial fiscal support. Growth in China remains solid, but has moderated as authorities have shifted their focus from activity to reduce financial stability risk. China remains solid, whichever way you look at it, but it's important. Financial stability risk around the world come to terms. Many other countries, primarily emerging market developing economies, are experiencing subdued pickups along with surge in COVID-19 cases. Even if recent waves of infections appear to be less disruptive to economic activity than previous ones. Growth in financial conditions have tightened somewhat, partly reflecting a rise in US bond yields amid increased inflation pressures. Commodity prices have increased markedly owing to improving global outlook as well as commodity specific supply factors. Supply constraints, growing demand, supply as well as demand, both are now cautiously optimistic, and that's why commodity prices are shooting, whether it's copper or other industrial metals. Gold is again, precious metals are going up as a safe haven. Global trade has continued to rebound. However, the growth of the strength of the trade growth is to be dampened by shifting activity from manufacturing to low trade intensive domestic services sectors in countries where COVID-19 caseloads have been declining. COVID-19 caseloads have been declining. Now, launching a durable economic recovery will not be possible until containment is achieved through widespread, equitable vaccination. We all understand. So, equitable distribution. A supportive external environment has helped to bioactivity. Strengthening the external demand has boosted the export of raw commodities and traded goods, while still global financial conditions have helped to ease the burden of heavy debt loads among the emerging markets, government and corporates both. Looking beyond 2021, emerging market, developing economies, policymakers can help to realize it's important we bring a policy framework, a sustained expansion seen of the growth by decisively implementing growth enhancing reforms. You have to enhance the reforms. Very important. Health, let's take health for example. The goal is to defeat the virus and establish a more effective global public health system that has capacity to monitor and quickly respond to major disease outbreaks. Measures create a counter-coronavirus coalition of allied nations, close partners, and like-minded states devoted to defeating the virus. Create a counter-coronavirus coalition of allied nations, close partners, and like-minded states devoted to defeating the virus. Reforms and strengthen existing global health institutions, the World Health Organizations. Strengthening the existing global health institutions, including WHO. Very important coalition of allied nations. That's what G7 is meeting now. And like-minded states have to defeat the virus, create new institutions and secure public health. An International Public Health Monitoring Agency, Economic side primary goal, limit the economic damage caused by the virus. Limit, that's what everyone is engaged in. Facilitate inclusive, equitable and rapid rebound. Inclusive, equitable and rapid rebound. Damage the caused by the virus. Promote a reimagined post-COVID-19 open economic systems that delivers increased standard of living. Reimagine, very important, it's an opportunity. Work through G7 and G20 to coordinate the global economic response. Protect against economic vulnerabilities, strengthen and secure supply chains, ensure globalized, free and fair system of trade, negotiate new trade agreements, come to terms and again negotiate globalized, free and fair, very important. It's not between developed economies and developing economies. Free and fair trade. Inclusive financial strength. That is, it means you have to bring up the poor into the middle income category. Reduce poverty alleviation. Eradication is a bigger goal. Same time, you have to make sure, reduce the income inequality. You have to make sure that everyone is happy. Common man is happy. The gap between the rich and poor has to be minimized. The leverage of new technologies and lessons learned from the pandemic to reimagine a prosperous post-COVID global economy that prioritizes inclusive growth. Leverage on new technologies and lessons learned from the pandemic to reimagine a prosperous post-COVID global economy. Now, in terms of governance, we talked about health, we talked about the economic side. When it comes to governance, stem the tide of democracies backsliding towards autocracy. Advance the spread of democracy and achieve greater unity across all democracies. Very important point. Governance-wise, you need to bring in more democratic framework. Two successful democratic models of pandemic response: Finland, Iceland, New Zealand, Singapore, South Korea, and Taiwan. Two successful democratic models of pandemic response. Very good examples. Finland has managed well, Iceland has managed well, New Zealand has managed well, all lands. Singapore has handled well, South Korea has handled reasonably well, and Taiwan. Leverage new technologies, especially digital platforms, to modernize elections and help revitalize existing democracies. Increase responsibility for institutions like G7 or a new D10, democratic countries 10, to strengthen coordination among the democratic allies, D10 and a new D10. That's interesting, isn't it? So, reforms to strengthen global scene, health, recover, regeneration, reform existing global health institutions, create a new global health institutions, international public health watchdog, economy, again, secure supply chains, G7 and G20 to coordinate global economic process, pursue a globalized, free and fair trade systems, leverage new technologies and lessons, governance, all three, what we have to sum it up, recover governance, D10, increase the responsibilities for institutions like G7 or new D10, leverage on new digital technologies to modernize elections and revitalizing existing democracies. Trade for peace is an imperative initiation of WHD, World Humanitarian Drive. Special compliments to build trade harmony by breaking down the silos of trade to innovate opportunities for establishing interdisciplinary approaches on leveraging the multi-trading systems and secure to develop a fair trade cycle to strengthen our world economy and peace. Interdisciplinary approaches on leveraging multilateral trading systems and security. So we need to bring in that interdisciplinary approaches to develop a fair trade cycle to strengthen our world economy and peace. And again, the Trade for Peace network aims to provide platform for regular exchange between policymakers and experts from trade, peace and humanitarian communities so that they can explore the nexus between the multilateral trading systems, peace and security. It will explore the areas of collaborations between the members of the network to support FCA states in achieving stability and prosperity through WTO accession. The Trade for Peace programs recalls the ethos of Marrakesh Agreement for the WTO is about people. We must focus on delivering for people in fragile and conflict affecting countries. The Trade for Peace programs recalls the ethos of Marrakesh Agreement for WTO is about people. We must focus on delivering people in fragile and conflict affected areas. It will also explore the areas of collaborations between members of network to support FCA states in achieving stability and prosperity through WTO accession. So when it comes to Trade for Peace, support the existing piece of assetting projects through information and experience sharing. Share it across. To examine and facilitate integration of global economies through fair reforms, trade policy frameworks and institutions. Again, collaborate. Establishing a partnership with other institutions, multinational companies, academic institutions and professional associations. Showcasing achievements at various forums that will explore the intersections among multilateral trade, peace and security by conducting outreach programs. Focusing on peace as an enabler of economic prosperity and human resilience in a post-pandemic world. Working to create attitudes, structures and institutions that underpin and sustain powerful societies. Promote transparency and good governance. World merchandise trade volume. Let us look at the global trade itself. So we have solutions within us, collaborations. That's what exactly the root. The world merchandise trade expected to increase 8% in 2021 after falling 5.3% in 2020. Trade growth will likely to slow 4% next year, with the total volume of global trade remaining below the pre-pandemic trend. We have, again, improve upon. That's a danger. World GDP, we have talked about. Merchandise trade in nominal dollar terms fell 2020 by 8%, while commercial services declined by 20%. Last year, merchandise trade overall it moved by 8%. Commercial services come down by 20%. Travel services were down 63% in 2020. 63% is down and are not expected to fully recover until the pandemic wanes. WTO is indispensable legal backbone of the international trading systems. 164 WTO members still have a long way to go before worldwide trade is free from all major restrictions and clearly regulated in every aspect. Many important areas of the world trade are still subject either to insufficient rules at the multilateral levels or to no such regulations at all. For example, investments, competition, public procurement, trade services. Moreover, many countries, including India, Brazil, China, invoke numerous exceptions and special regulations. WTO has served as constructed focal point during the pandemic by helping countries coordinate their policy response. First, by helping the members coordinate their trade policies. Second, by ensuring transparency with regard to pandemic-related measures. And lastly, by monitoring members' trade response to the pandemic. By 23rd April 2020, 80 countries are into the game. 80 countries and separate customs territories introduced export bans or restrictions, and more countries were following suit. That's not a great momentum. Export restrictions were primarily on personal protective gear, pharmaceuticals, foodstuffs, medical devices, and COVID-19. That's more closed. These measures, often referred to as beggar thy neighbor policies, resulted in severe shortage of food and pharmaceuticals in import-dependent countries. As a primary forum for policy coordination, international cooperations on international trade matters, the WTO held a General Council meeting on 15th May 2020. While recognizing their needs, WTO members highlighted the importance of keeping such measures temporary, targeted, proportional, and transparent. Temporary, targeted, proportional, transparent, and keeping the supply chain of essential goods on. The meetings at WTO has helped the members come together and discuss the trade response pandemic, and in turn coordinate their policies to provide secure and predictable access to essential goods. List of pandemic-related support measures implemented by members, which includes state aid and other forms of government subsidies. Measures are important. WTO has aligned it, but still the actionables are very many. The trade policy review mechanism helps collectively to monitor the members' policies and ensure that the ongoing pandemic is not used as a facade to implement protections or trade restrictive measures which would otherwise run afoul countries' trade obligations. It's very important. Free trade between countries could reduce international conflict because trade forges connection between nations and gives each country an incentive to avoid war with trading neighbors. If you have trade, then you will avoid conflicts. So it is a two-way streets. So your defense expenditure will come down in a way because you need reconciliation with the trading neighbors. That's more important. And that's what exactly our focus should be. Now, when it comes to US-China relationship, Biden administration is set to strike a force after China on trade. The supply chain trade strike force led by US Trade Representative will look for specific violation contributing to hollowing out of supply chains. The Commerce Department is considering a Section 232 investigation into the national security impact of new magnet imports, largely from China. US President Joe Biden is set to ban Americans from investing in dozens of Chinese tech and defense firms with alleged military ties. The new executive order will come into effect on 2nd August, hitting 59 firms, including communication giant Huawei. The list of firms will be updated on a rolling basis. Free trade, as a member of the Gulf Cooperation Council, Qatar is a signatory to the GCC Free Trade Agreement. This agreement, duty-free access to all the goods, produced in the GCC states, provided the goods meet the content requirements. What is the content requirements? At least 40% value added within GCC factories, which are at least 50% owned by GCC entities. In January 2003, the GCC implemented a unified customs tariffs to include regional trade. These are the main points which we have to understand, but still we'll have a detailed descriptions of all this in the coming days.